movies, Thanos' motivation is he wants balance in the universe. So he wants to find an Infinity Stone so he can snap away half the people so it's more resources for the people left.
Right.
When we invest in clean energy and electric vehicles and reduce population, more of our children can breathe clean air and drink clean water.
About overpopulation are back.
We need to address much more aggressively the population part of the equation.
If we keep ignoring this exponential population rise, nature will reduce human population for us.
As we make the world healthier, is the population going to get so big that feeding everybody and maintaining the environment is going to be impossible?
Overpopulation, so long predicted, has stolen upon us. It's getting worse week by week.
To pollute the seas with a wide variety of compounds and so on. It's very difficult for me to picture things holding together for more than another decade or so.
Population is increasing by 23 people every 10 seconds. It's clear that world population growth remains completely out of control.
And you can see that in the 60s, that reached a pretty high number, over 2% per year. And it's now come way, way down.
In the 1960s, a new kind of fear began to spread across America.
The U.S. could be busting out at the seams by the end of the century. If we do not, by humane means, limit our numbers, then numbers are going to be limited by more famines and shortages and consequent social conflict.
In beating the overpopulation drum since, well, it really kicked in the 1960s, because there were dire predictions. By the year 2000, the Club of Rome came out and said, well, there'll be riots and mass starvation and mass movement of migrants and all the things you hear about climate change because there's too many people on the planet. And that just didn't happen at all. It wasn't just wrong, it was anti-true.
And we can see that instead of continuing, it actually flattens out. Another way to see that is through this rate of population growth.
And death rate and birth rate in balance, and there's only two ways to do it. One is to bring the birth rate down, the other is to push the death rate up.
So Melinda and I wondered whether providing new medicines and keeping children alive, would that create more of a population problem?
And at what cost? Trading lives for lives? What kind of world is that?
But the good news is that the faster we improve health, the faster family size goes down.
Maybe anybody who's thinking of having a third child ought to go hungry a week.
I am inevitable.
Population collapse. Collapse. I want to emphasize this. The biggest issue in 20 years will be population collapse, not explosion. Collapse. It's very easy to see what the world will look like in 20 years because humans have a 20-year boot sequence. So like you say, okay, well, who was born last year? Okay, now you know what the world look like in 20 years.
And what that means, of course, is that you run out of young people, right? You don't run out of old people first because everyone who is here now is going to be 30 years older in 30 years. And it'll be young people we don't have enough of. And of course, young people are the ones who do the innovation and are going to do most of the heavy lifting, etc.
It's that easy.
I absolutely agree with that. The population problem is going to be facing huge challenge. 1.4 billion people in China sounds a lot, but I think next 20 years we'll see this thing will bring big trouble to China, and the population decreasing of the whole. The speed.
Since people didn't have enough kids, China doesn't have enough young workers to continue its economic growth and support the retired population. There are millions more young men than women, creating a social issue where millions of men have no hope of marriage or family. Since not enough people are starting a family, it's projected that China's population will continue to shrink in the future.
Our population is expected to decrease 10.1%. Our population also decreasing 10.9%. 12.3% decrease here too. 13.4% decrease here. You're right, actually. For us, it's decreasing 15.5%. I'm not in Europe, and our population might decrease 16.3%. Yeah, we might decrease 18.2%. You were not lying. A lot of us are in Europe, so we're decreasing 21.6%. Yeah, we might decrease 22.1%. Well, I'm first. I might decrease 22.5%.
I don't think it's a stretch to say that the way he refers to the death panels, you're not supposed to talk about the death panels, meaning he thinks that's a conversation we actually need to have. And so that you'll understand what he means by death panels, he's talking about a committee that makes determinations about end-of-life care, whether or not you actually get it. This is purely utilitarian. It's the idea of determining, do we spend the resources on you to give you another couple months of life?
In Lucer's book, We Will Not Be Silent, he's got a whole chapter on the destruction of the nuclear family. Because if the family is strong, Michael Novak said, then the republic thrives. If the family fails, then government, by definition, almost has to step in.
This is an act of genius or anything that as soon as you educate women, the size of family shrinks precipitously, like below replacement. And that's partly because women have other options. That's a huge part.
We're seeing this play out.
From one Marxist to another, and there are different strains of Marxism. Matter of fact, at Georgetown, you had people that were from Asia and Africa and South America, and so liberation theology looks very different than Marxism from England or from Europe. Nevertheless, they all wanted to eliminate the family. They wanted to redefine the family because the family and God, a belief in God, and religion are the two barriers to communism.
Imagine a society where we have to allow the thoughts and add meaning to the thoughts and the reality behind what 3-year-olds think.
Live not by lies is a quote from Alexander Solzhenitsyn, in which we should live by the truth, not live by lies. And what he has done is said, we are seeing more and more people that have come over here from Poland and Czechoslovakia and many of the Soviet-dominated countries, and they're saying, America looks like the country I just left.
This is what the left is after, right? And then you say, what do these things have in common? Attacked men, attack women, attack gender, attack all of these things. And the one thing that's in the middle is family, right? Because when you're encouraging children to change their genders and to go through sex change surgeries, right? The decision that they cannot reverse later in life, what you are basically saying is these kids will not be able to have offspring, right? All of these things are related to the breakdown of family. They want the family unit gone because that is the thing that has made Western civilization the strongest.
And so that's why you saw that Marx and Engels wanted to destroy the family. And of course, Marx said that religion is the opiate of the people. And as a result, you can see that the destruction of the nuclear family is intended because ultimately, if you want everybody to obey the state, they can't have an allegiance to God, and they can't have an allegiance to their family.
Maybe we'll just shame people out of having children. And I've seen people do that. Literally, I saw a professor.
The totalitarianism that we had in the government was a hard totalitarianism, where the government was persecuting Christians. He says what we have today is what he calls a soft totalitarianism. Wouldn't call it that soft, but it's not so much coming from the government. Some of it is coming from this administration. Most of it's coming from Silicon Valley. And it's coming from the cancel culture. It's Facebook saying, we aren't going to let you say this. It's the university. People say, you at Probe used to speak on college campuses. Yeah, I used to actually have professors invite me in and say, you've heard what I've had to say, but we have Mr. Anderson here. He's with the Christian Update Forum. I thought you'd at least like to hear a different point of view. Is that happening today on college campuses? No, it's not. And again, it's soft totalitarianism, and we're going to cancel you. We're going to drive you out of business if we can. You better bake me a cake, and you better give me some flowers, and you better not say anything harsh about critical race theory, harsh about Black Lives Matter, whatever, because we will destroy you.
Ehrlich's views on how to bring that birth rate down were concrete. Compulsion if voluntary methods fail, creating a blacklist of people, companies, and organizations impeding population control in the United States, responsibility prizes for childless marriages, a tax on children, and a luxury tax on diapers and cribs.
Paul Ehrlich could recommend things like putting stuff in public water that would make people not as fertile.
A few decades ago, experts started sounding the alarm about overpopulation. They were worried because humankind was growing exponentially. We went from 1 billion people in 1800 to 2 billion people in 1900 to over 5 billion people in the 1980s. If this trend were to continue, human civilization would run into big problems. We'd run out of, well, pretty much everything in just a few decades. But the doomsday scenario predicted by those experts hasn't happened, and it isn't going to. Big thing that has defused our population bomb is that people just aren't having as many babies as they used to. And that's happening for two main reasons. First, the world's poorest people are getting less poor. Just a half century ago, half of the families on Earth made less than the equivalent of $2 US a day. Today, only 10% make that little. And it turns out that families that make more than $2 a day benefit less from having lots of kids and have more control over how many kids they do have. As a result, families living above that $2 a day threshold have, on average, 2 kids, compared to the 5 that poorer families have. That reduction in poverty alone means that the average family has 1.3 fewer kids than they used to.
The premise of Idiocracy is there's this really smart couple and they keep putting it off, keep putting off having kids. And at the same time, you're showing this dude who lives in a trailer park, all these chicks near him. He knocks up her and she's chasing him with a frying pan because she finds out he knocked up her too. And it's wild. Yeah. And it's just like, it just shows how people are just getting dumber and dumber. The dumber people are overpopulating. The smart people aren't having any children.
Have gone from attending just 7 years of school to more than 11. And it turns out that girls who stay in school longer tend to get married later, which means that they start their families later, which generally means that they have fewer kids. Some studies have shown that for every 4 additional years a girl stays in school, she'll give birth to 1 less child than she would have otherwise.
You know, it's interesting. Family is almost a forgotten concept in our culture. It's been so devalued in our culture. A lot of people are upset about the gay marriage debate and about the civil unions debate. When the fact of the matter is, this is merely a progression. We have so devalued family that this is just the logical next step.
We should not be afraid to leave these men. We are not stuck with these people. Marriage is not a sanctimonious thing. It is paperwork. It's something, it's a commitment you make to someone. But if you feel like you're not getting anything from that commitment and you're trying, you gotta go. You gotta
forget about the summer of love, because it's the summer of divorce. AGT host Sofia Vergara and hubby Joe Manganiello just called it quits. As did Ariana Grande and husband Dalton Gomez. Kevin Costner and his wife of nearly 20 years, Christine Baumgartner, recently said, "I don't," with Costner being ordered to pay $130,000 in child support a month. And today, actress Reese Witherspoon's divorce to talent agent Jim Toth was officially finalized.
Extra stress, financial pressures, the fact that nobody is doing any work, so they're sitting around just staring at each other, getting tired of each other.
And 3 years of the pandemic lockdown didn't help either.
When people spend a lot of time together, they get sick of each other. So it definitely could be COVID contributed.
As for Sophia and Joe, many aren't surprised they only lasted 7 years.
There's a period of time that couples tend to get tired of each other, and it's around 7 years. So divorce lawyers have dubbed it the 7-year itch.
Family has virtually no meaning in our culture anymore, and people don't know how to talk about family, let alone to operate within the context of a family.
I also suggest that we separate out some of the legal perks of marriage so that single people and other kinds of families get these benefits. Marriage should not be the gateway to social and economic privilege anymore. That time is done.
A social psyop, that marriage is a broken and dated institution. In fact, some say today women don't even need men.
She said, a woman without a man is like a fish without a bicycle. I mean, we love you guys, but the truth of the matter is that we can function without...
We're not raising young men who desire to be husbands. We're not raising young women who desire to be wives or mothers. We're not raising young women at all. We're just raising men who happen to be biologically capable of having children, basically, when it comes to our young girls. And so when you are raising a culture who doesn't understand what family is, who doesn't see the family as a meaningful goal.
Create more single women in American society. Well, starting with the Great Society and continuing today, the federal tax code and the welfare state encourages women to stay single as long as possible. Are you poor and single? Here's an income tax credit. Are you a single mom? There's a child tax credit. And then there's a half dozen welfare programs all designed to incentivize single ladies syndrome. But that's not all. The left wants to take away incentives for married couples too. Money's a big factor too. The longer women stay single, the longer they stay in the workforce, and by the time they're in their 30s, they have to spend a fortune on fertility treatments when they don't even need a husband, actually, at this point. This was explained to us earlier.
They want us to put off having a family so that we're going to spend big money in order to have that family later on after putting our career first for decades.
it makes sense that we would then have young couples and young parents who have very little idea of what it means to fill these roles. Well, now we're beginning to see the fruit of it. And we're seeing 70 to 88% of our young people walk away from the faith by the end of their freshman year in college, those who are raised in Christian homes. And people are turning around and they're shaking their fist and they're saying, why? Well, because we dropped the ball on the most foundational and fundamental institution that God has given us. When we're wrong on family, we'll be wrong on the church. We'll be wrong on the government. We'll be wrong in general.
Marriage isn't just good for the Republican Party, it's good for you too. A study from the University of Chicago found that married couples are 30% happier than their unmarried friends. They're also wealthier and healthier. But what do I know? Marriage has only worked for like thousands of years.
The population bomb theory and other clever tactics dramatically mentally manipulated the mass population in the 1960s. Like a slow cancer that may or may not come true in 50 years, the elite would reduce the population by over half. Population reduction through the world's birth rate, eliminating over half of humanity as the movie's Thanos desires.
I am inevitable.